Hello, travelers. Welcome to Reach the World. For over 20 years, Reach the World has used virtual exchange to inspire youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens. My name is Tim, and this week, together with Citi's E for Education campaign, we're going on a journey to explore how global citizens can put that valuable skill set to work as part of a global career. Throughout this week, we'll be connecting with Citi employees in 9 financial capitals across 6 continents. They've generously agreed to share their stories, observations, and tips for finding success in this highly interconnected global economy. For a complete listing of upcoming Citi Global Career Journey live stream events, check out athome.reachtheworld.org. Today, we're continuing the Citi Global Career Journey with a stop in Sydney, Australia, to speak with Citi employees Ben Unglis and Reese Griffiths. Ben and Reese are joining us virtually to talk about working, living, and thriving professionally in Sydney. But before we meet Ben and Reese, I want to welcome the teachers, students, Reach the World travelers, and early career professionals who are watching this live stream today. Please feel free to use the YouTube chat bar to let us know you're here, where you're joining from, and to share any questions you have for our guests as we go. We'll get to as many questions as we can in the next 45 minutes. And with that, I think we're ready to go. Ben and Reese, welcome to Reach the World.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We're gonna just sort of dive right into things. I know Reese is gonna join us in a little bit, so we'll start with you, Ben. We'll put you on the spot. It's great to have you here. You're joining us from the future today. It's Friday morning in Sydney. It's really, really nice to talk to you. The best place for us to start, I think, is to ask you what your personal career journey has been like. What was it that made you sort of first start to think about working for an organization that really had ties all over the globe, and what got you down this career path?
Yeah, sure. So thanks again for having us, guys. It's a real privilege to be able to speak to you guys. So, my career clearly has been within Sydney throughout, the 5 or so years that I've left university or college. So originally I wasn't actually from Sydney, and it's probably, the equivalent of someone, moving from somewhere else in the States to say like either New York City or a Chicago or something like that, just where the opportunities are in a larger financial district. I came actually from the capital, Canberra, where the majority of jobs are in the public sector. And so moved to Sydney where there are, further opportunities to study and then work in the financial sector. So initially I actually started working for one of the large domestic banks here in Australia, which did have a small global presence, but didn't have anything like what, say, Citibank does. And so I think, like, as you say, that one of the main reasons that I did start thinking about moving towards Citibank and a kind of, financial institution with a larger global presence was for that exact reason. These institutions are such significant and large players in the global economy, and the reach that they have is so significant and important across the globe, that it's just was kind of a bit more enticing, and certainly a big incentive for me to do that. Whereas the domestic bank that I was working at previously was, very focused on the Australian and New Zealand economy, which in the full global scheme of things isn't as significant, as potentially some people in Australia might like to think. But it's, so ultimately Citi just provided that exposure to the global financial sector, and in working at Citi, you certainly get exposure to that. Working every day with people across the world, from different backgrounds, different experiences, and that sort of thing. So it's certainly a completely different prospect working for a company like Citi with such a huge presence, rather than one of the domestic banks here in Australia, and something that's really a massive draw card for working at an institution like Citi.
Did you have any experiences, either like when you were quite a bit younger or in your university days, that made you, or that you can identify as like made you excited to be a part of the larger world? For some people, what you described, a bank or a job that had like really global reach, would be very intimidating and wouldn't be as exciting. What was it about your studies or the way you grew up that made you interested in that larger connection?
Yeah, so I think I was lucky enough to do quite a lot of not a lot of traveling, but some traveling throughout my university years. So I was able to travel through Europe and North America for like large stints throughout my university, and just found that the exposure you can get to different cultures, different people, and different ways of thinking is hugely beneficial in terms of your own career, personal development. But just broadly in the way that you think. I think in Australia, and potentially this applies to other countries as well, there's a very there's potentially a trap in thinking in a very localized Australian centric way. Whereas when you work at an organization like Citi, and as I experienced in my travels, when you get exposed to different people who have had different upbringings, live in a different society, the way that they view things can be significantly different to what you do. And I especially found that was the case, even moving from, say, where I grew up in Canberra to Sydney. Like the way that people think about things, the way people interact and work, certainly is a lot different and provides a different perspective, and certainly I think helps to provide a more rounded way of thinking. So that was probably what drew me to trying to work at a bit of a larger institution, plus the opportunities that it provides in being able to work in different areas. So I haven't done it yet, but in the future I'd like to move and work in one of the largest centers, probably who you've been speaking to throughout this week, in either in Asia or London or New York. And so an institution like Citi, provides those opportunities comparatively to, say, a domestic bank here, which is another reason for being interested in Citibank.
Okay. Out of curiosity, did you study abroad when you were in university?
No, I didn't study abroad. I probably just wasn't organized enough, to be honest. But the main exposure I had to traveling was just basically doing traveling with friends. So I did in my university breaks. So I mean, that I always found that was one of the main perks of university, was the quite lengthy holiday period breaks that we got here, at least in Australia. So got to do at least a few large international trips for long periods of time, which was great. So although I think I've got a lot more traveling that I hope I can be doing in future. Well, who knows when that will be, but that was one of the main, that was how I did my traveling overseas. And I suppose it is a slight regret of mine that I didn't do a study abroad, but hopefully I'll be able to work abroad and get a similar experience that way.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I want to come back in just a little bit and talk about your personal career working experience in Sydney. But Reese has joined us. Hey, Reese.
Hey, Tim. How are you, mate? Sorry, I'm late there, team.
Yeah, no problem. Welcome. We were just talking with Ben about his sort of introduction to the idea of global experience and what got him interested in working in a global career. I wondered if you could share your own experiences. What brought you into this realm of a global career?
Yeah, I mean, I probably similar background to Benny. I just caught the last little bit that he was explaining. He came from a domestic bank. I started my career at a domestic as well. Actually, I started in private wealth. So I wasn't really a part of a global banking team. It was more, a domestic equities team. I actually moved across to the National Australia Bank here, which is quite a large domestic bank in Australia. And I've always kind of really focused on and wanted to work offshore at some point in my career, or at the very least be a part of a bank and a franchise that has a global footprint. So for me, joining the likes of Citi was always a goal of mine. And look, a year and a half, 18 months ago, I was lucky enough to land the seat here in Sydney.
Fantastic. Sort of financial industry aside, what is it? Can you pinpoint anything in your childhood or your upbringing that made you comfortable with the idea of working for an organization that had such global reach?
Yeah, I mean, look, I traveled quite a bit when I was young. I was fortunate enough to go abroad quite a few times, both by myself and obviously, of course, with my family. Always found the idea of living offshore and learning, new languages, new cultures, that sort of thing, are quite intriguing. So. I've always been, quite interested in the idea of not just staying within the confines of what I know and kind of trying to push a little bit. That being said, I haven't really had the opportunity at this stage to live offshore at this point. But as I mentioned, it's definitely something that I'd like to explore at some stage.
All right, great. Thanks, Reese. Let's move on to our second topic, which is much more specific to Sydney and Australia in particular. We've gotten a chance to speak with a bunch of your colleagues around the world really this week who have described to us what their average day is in their particular market. And if possible, I mean, I don't think everyone who's watching today is in finance or is interested in finance in particular, but everyone here is interested in, global cities where you're interacting with other offices in other countries on an everyday basis. What is that like in Sydney in particular? Ben, you want to start with you, Ben?
Yeah, sorry. So what was the exact question? Sorry, I missed the last bit of that, Tim.
Yeah, we're switching over to talking about Sydney specifically. What is it like to live and work in Sydney?
Yeah, okay. I mean, well, you can probably tell maybe through what Reese is wearing that Sydney's a fairly laid-back kind of place. I mean, we've got a pretty generous and comfortable kind of living setup. Like basically, as a country and as a society, we're fairly laid back. So, like this ties in pretty well with like the climate that we live in. Like we're very blessed that, say, like the worst we ever get to, I'm not sure what it would be in Fahrenheit, but like we very rarely ever dip below 10 degrees Celsius and have these really nice, beautiful, warm summers. And we're also blessed to live on the beach with a very, say, like coastal and active and fit lifestyle. So, it really is, and I always speak to this, like with my partner about this, how lucky we are to live in somewhere like Sydney and also Australia. Like we really are blessed with a great climate. Just the geography of where we live is pretty magnificent as well. So it is a really great place to live and work. We are as a nation, we're fairly relaxed and laid back. And I mean, I feel like that comparatively, we get exposed to a pretty broad cross section of the working world, and the conditions that we get as a workforce and as an organisation are very conducive with, say, a good work-life balance. So yeah, it really is a great place to live and work. But yeah, so I mean, if anyone's interested in coming to Sydney, we could speak about it all day. I mean, Reese is well tanned. He goes to the beach a lot, works out. So there's plenty of benefits to living in Sydney.
Reese, I'd love to hear your perspective too. And specifically, Is there anything that, say, if you were a employee from the United States who transferred to the Sydney office, are there any particular skills that you would need to know to succeed in Sydney specifically?
Look, I think that just touching on what Benny said, it is quite a relaxed and I don't want to say informal, but laid back culture in Australia, and it doesn't mean that we're
sorry, Reese, cutting out.
You only have to look outside to see how beautiful the weather is. Most days, a lot of people want to take advantage of that, and particularly at the moment, given that, as you can see, I'm at home. This COVID sort of situation has, if anything, opened up the door of working from home now permanently, or part time and that sort of thing. So look, I think that when you look at a skill set, look, there's really nothing as such, better than just coming down and trying to get your feet on the ground down here. I think there's a lot of similarities between the US and Australia. And I think when it comes to culture, like Ben and I speak to our New York desk, pretty much every morning. The business here that we run in Australia is also acts as a night desk for New York. So it means that there's a lot of crossover between the Australian business and the New York business. And as such, we get to know these guys very well. The sense of humor is very similar. We both cultures are very sport orientated as well. We speak about sport quite often, and I think that if anyone was to come down and possibly spend some time down here, you'd notice that there really is there's a lot of similarities between the two. So it may be a good first look. I think a lot of people might think that Australia is so far away that it's so different and possibly backwards of what you would know, but you'd be surprised at how similar it is to the United States.
All right, that's a great perspective. Thank you. I want to switch. We have a bunch of Reach the World travelers who are with us today on the call who are eager to ask you questions, but I want to hit one more topic first before we get them on camera to ask their questions. And this is specifically about career advice. A lot of our travelers are right at the beginning of their careers. They've had, amazing study abroad experiences that have opened up their eyes to all the great things that you could do with a global career, all the excitement and adventure. I wondered, as two people who have been successful in their global careers, what advice would you have for this group? What sort of practical steps could they take at this moment to make themselves strong job candidates for a company like Citi, where they're dealing with people from multiple cultures every day?
Yeah, so I think, and I'll probably go back to say when I was first starting my career, and it's extremely competitive kind of landscape in Australia, and I know for a fact it's very competitive in the States as well. So I think you've just got to be open to a lot of opportunities and experiences that you could potentially be shown. I think when you're young, and still now, I certainly have kind of views that are similar to this, but you kind of become very, very defined in what you kind of view as success. What would be, successful for you, what role you think you should be in, like how quickly you think you should be progressing. And I think when you get into the workforce, like this does change very quickly in terms of, what actually is what you want to get out of your career, how you can progress and that sort of thing. So my advice to like young people would be just to be very open to different opportunities. It might not be exactly what you want to do. And then once you've got this, a first opportunity, just to really pay attention and try and be the best you can be at every specific role that you're doing, because that will then lead to opportunities down the track. I think, especially young people, young ambitious people fall into a trap quite often of always looking at what's next and trying to, and I'm certainly guilty of this as well, looking at what's next rather than really just focusing intently on what they're doing at the time and trying to be the best of what they can do. So, probably to sum that up, it's don't get too far ahead of yourself. Like you've got so many years ahead of you in a career that you don't really need to be shooting the lights out, 1, 2, 3 years into your career. It's kind of a long game. So don't get too concerned or ahead of yourself with these sort of things.
That's great advice, Ben. And before we go to Reese, let me ask you real quick, Ben, one of the themes that has emerged this week is that many of your colleagues did not intend to go into finance and have gotten to their careers with Citi in sort of roundabout ways. Did you always want to be in finance, or did you come to this job in a roundabout way?
Probably similar, kind of roundabout way. So when I first left school, I intended on studying medicine, and so I went into university doing an undergrad in medical science. And And then, basically after a year and a half, realized that my skills, my interests probably weren't actually aligned with wanting to do that. I kind of had, a bit of a fanciful idea in my mind that medicine was what was right for me. But when it came down to it, and, when I had a real thorough think about what I was doing, finance kind of was more of the natural role for me in terms of the skill set I have, and how I can apply that. And so, yeah, I did definitely have a bit of a roundabout way in getting into the finance sector. And I think that's shared by a lot of people too. And it's like, as you mentioned, I don't think, and especially nowadays, I don't think there's a whole lot of people who necessarily say, you know what, I want to be a banker. But yeah, it's certainly, for me, has worked out well in terms of being able to apply my skill set every day and enjoy the work I'm doing.
All right, great, thank you. All right, Reese, how about you? What advice do you have for our viewers about finding success?
Yeah, look, just to touch on what Ben just said lastly there, I mean, I think it's really important to find something that you love to do. You look, the amount of times in my career that I've traced down, an idea of what I think I wanted to do and then switched to other things. I just think it's really important that you find something that you enjoy doing day in, day out. Because success will then obviously come on the back of that. You need to be able to obviously put the work in and dedicate yourself to your job in an effort to be productive and of course successful. And you'll just find it a lot easier to do that if you're enjoying what you're doing. I would say don't also just follow the idea of trying to make money either. Be generally interested in an area or a subject and explore that and try and make your career around something that you enjoy doing. The other thing I'd say as well is just be flexible. There's so many people out there that, as again Ben said, that are stuck in their ways about what they want to do. Just open your eyes a little bit, whether it's stepping offshore or if it's staying at home or if it's looking at a completely different field. Just be flexible to the idea of success can come in a multitude of ways. And, just because at one point in your career, you think that, banking is the way to go, doesn't mean you can't be, in medicine, in law, or, in anything. I just say, just make sure you keep an open mind and be flexible.
All right, thank you, Reese. As sort of a follow-up question, I'm wondering, in your time with Citi or even previously, are there any hard or soft skills that you've found to be especially important in finding success or doing well?
Yeah, I think that the relationships is pretty much everything, right? Like, both on the client side and then on the internal side. People like to deal with people that they like and they get along with. And it's the same when you look at whoever you're sitting next to day in, day out. So I work with Ben and we get along very well. But the thing is, I spend more time with Ben and the team than I do with, my family, right? So it's important that when it comes to a skill set, that you focus on, being able to be, approachable, a nice guy, all that sort of, all these qualities that people will really want to be around. And then on the flip side as well, when you're speaking to clients and you're trying to build rapport and build relationships, again, it's important to be, seen as the sort of person that people want to deal with. So people call them soft sales skills or however you want to phrase it. I just think that focusing on, just being a hard worker and of course, a nice guy and getting along with everyone, these sort of qualities, they might sound really simple, but there are too many people in this industry that they want to chase their way to the top and they step on everyone's shoulders, and you've really got to be a team player, right? I think that's really important to be a team player. So.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to switch this over to gallery view so we can see all of our travelers who have joined us here today. Great group of Reach the World travelers who are excited to ask you questions, and we've got plenty of time to do that. So I'm going to start with Anna, just because she's right in my top left corner. So go ahead, Anna.
So a question that I have for you guys is, I'm an economics major. I'm an economics and math major. And I like I guess the theory behind finance, but I've always been kind of put off by the culture of the finance industry, which is known for, little work-life balance, long work, at least in the States, in New York City, long work hours. And I was wondering how if that's actually the case, does it depend by company? Does it depend by job? And if so, how do you manage that?
Yeah, sure. I might take that one. I mean, look, there's no hiding. I mean, of course, there will be times where you're required to work hard in this industry, and I think that's the same in a lot of industries. Banking and finance really cops it quite a lot because, as we all know, it's very prevalent, particularly in the States, that you're required to work long, hard hours. I think it goes back to, though, enjoying what you do. If you enjoy what you're doing, then I don't really ever feel like, for example, taking my situation, like Ben and I, we have great work-life balance, I feel. But there are times when we, have to work a little later into the night. And I actually enjoy, the challenge and also, the content that we're covering over that period. So I find that it's never really, I'm not pushing myself to do it. I want to do it. And of course, I want to be there for the team as well. But to be honest with you, that there is times where, you'll have to work hard. But I think that's the same in a lot of industries. And it's, if you compare it to, I don't know, owning your own business, some of those small business owners in the States and in Australia are working just as hard, if not harder. I don't think there's any escaping, the idea that to be successful, you've got to do the work. I think it just comes down to, do you actually view it as, like painful, hard work, or do you enjoy the challenge and enjoy what you're doing?
All right. Thanks, Reese. Ben, do you want to add anything? You're muted. Let's unmute you first.
Is that better?
There we go. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with what Reese said. In terms of there will be times where you're asked to do some long hours or put in some hard work. But I also think that potentially from the perception that's been built around the finance industry, there has been a lot of drastic changes since, for example, the GFC, or back in how banking was in the 90s or early 2000s. And I think the banking industry has been forced to do this a lot due to the way that, say, other large companies and successful companies, like within the tech sector, how they have been able to reward their employees and grow as businesses, has been able to provide them with this quite generous, work-life balance, the reward schemes and that sort of thing. And so in order to retain and attract great talent, the banking and financial industry has certainly had to gravitate more towards that way of thinking rather than potentially the old school way, which, as you describe, is kind of the way that everyone externally might view banking and finance to be. So although, like as Reese mentioned, there will be times where people have to work hard and there are some hours that get put in, I definitely don't think the perception really matches up directly with the reality of the work that we do and the conditions that we work in. Our boss is very supportive of having a healthy work-life balance. And we know that our team in the States definitely shares this view as well. And something that's helped that even further has probably been COVID, where we can now spend a lot more time working from home, which means we don't have to commute back and forth, which gives us back additional hours in our day, which was probably something that didn't happen, say, 10 or 20 years ago. So, there's definitely things which are helping that conversation move in the right direction, and definitely don't feel that it's, matches up directly with potentially the perception that the public or outsiders get of the industry, that's for sure.
Ben, you had mentioned sort of towards the beginning that Sydney's like a pretty laid back place. Does what you just described change by market at all? Would you say Sydney is sort of more laid back in that sense because it's Sydney, or could Sydney sort of be a very similar work experience to Singapore or New York or London or any of the other major global financial hubs?
Yeah, I think it would be. It definitely changes from, say, center to center. So there's definitely different working styles. Acceptable kind of working conditions. Like I know, for example, say the US, our New York office have not as many annual leave holidays as we do, but we don't have as many as London do, and that changes the work conditions and the specific ways of going about business and the kind of general way of working definitely differs from center to center. I feel like the kind of the central idea of working hard, being the best we can be, providing the best service to our clients is central across all of the different places where Citi operates. But just in terms of the different working conditions, like how people enjoy working, how they do work on a day-to-day basis, does vary based upon the centers, though.
All right, great. Thank you for that. Yesenia, let's bring you into the conversation. You want to ask your question?
Yes. Hi. Thank you all for sharing all the information. I know we kind of touched on this, but is there anything that you would do during your undergrad, like some course? I'm an English major, so I just want to broaden my skills, and I don't really have a financial background or anything like that. So I was just wondering if you have any advice on how to get started.
Yeah, hey, Yesenia. Look, I think during your undergrad, it's important to network as much as possible. I actually did that quite a bit during my undergrad, not only for the idea of learning more and the experience, but look, when you leave university, one of the biggest challenges is landing that first job, right? So I would say utilize the time you have. I don't know how long you've got left in your undergrad, but I know my penultimate year, I networked as much as I possibly could, both around campus, but then utilizing the network within the campus to speak to people abroad and just in different industries. So whether or not you start the conversation with the professor and say, is there someone you could put me in touch with that I could just have a chat to? And then if you think about what you chat to these people about when you network. I'm a really big believer in networking, even now. Look, particularly now when you're in the workforce, no one is going to not enjoy sitting there and having a young, vibrant, enthusiastic person speak to them about their career and how they got to where they want to be and these sorts of things. And everyone is very willing to give advice and feedback. So I'd just say, reach out to as many people as you can, and obviously try and learn and gain, experience through that. You never know what's going to happen down the track. There could be an opportunity that comes off the back of one of these, catch-ups. For example, this job that I got now at Citi, to give you a bit of background, that basically I heard from a friend. I was working at a domestic bank, as I said before. I heard from a friend that the head of our department, Troy, he was potentially looking at hiring someone, and that friend, he actually worked at Citi, many years ago. So the job hadn't even been sort of posted, or there really wasn't any job to begin with at this stage. I emailed Troy. I didn't even know Troy. I had to guess his email about 5 times. Got all these kickbacks. I emailed Troy. Eventually got through to Troy and said, "Hi, Troy. My name's Reese. I'm currently working at NAB in the same field, blah, 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 blah. I'd love to just sit down and learn about your business. I understand there might be, a possibility in the future. I'd love to catch up." And look, I think even if you speak to Troy now, he loved that proactivity of me coming to him and saying, "Look, I'd love to just learn about your business." And to be fair, I did that with a lot of people in the industry before I moved to Citi. So just as an example, I would do things like that. Just think about how you can utilize the time you have at the moment at within your undergrad. Again, I don't know how much time you've got left, but let's say you've got a year to go. Just utilize that full year and try and build out a network. And then again, you never know where it's going to lead, right?
All right, that's great advice, Reese. Thank you. Great question, Yesenia. Jennifer, I'm going counterclockwise around my screen, so you're next.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, since you guys are in Australia, do you ever feel like limited with your opportunities since Australia is so far away from everything? Or do you feel like, I don't know, like more special since you're so far away from everything that more people would want to work with you and see like your point of view and things and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So I think it's probably a bit of both. So a lot of the time, we kind of feel like we get treated like a long lost brother or sister on the edge of the world, and can kind of sometimes feel like we're a bit left out of conversations, or just out of thought, kind of. And because we don't operate within the same time frame as the major financial centers, such as like London and New York, and so often we do kind of share that thought that we are a bit out of not out of sync potentially with the other centers. At the same time, however, though, as being part of this global business, people really do value our opinions, just because they feel like we have a different perspective on things compared to what they might otherwise. Because we're a smaller centre here for Citi as well, we get exposed to a lot of things, and the full range of the business that, say, someone in New York might not, because they only have to have exposure to a very specific part of the business. Whereas in Australia, because we're a much smaller team, we have to have full oversight over the business here, the full business here in Australia. And so we do often have, a really great perspective on the business, how to operate best. And for that reason, we feel like that our opinions are very much appreciated and asked for on a global basis. But it is sometimes, and I think I touched on before, in Australia, we are very Australian centric and probably like to overstate even our footprint on the global map. But at the same time, do often sometimes feel like we are a bit left out. But we just make sure we have to speak up as much as possible, just to make sure that we're not forgotten down here.
It sort of sounds too, you were saying you wake up and you pick up, you communicate with New York, and you sort of pick up where they're leaving off, and I'm sure you hand it off to somebody, to keep the sort of 24-hour business cycle going. It seems in another perspective too, like it would be impossible to feel left out. It seems like both of you are constantly in touch with the broader world too, if not physically, just digitally, electronically.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's definitely the case. I mean, when I say that, it is probably a bit tongue in cheek that we're left out, but we're constantly in connection with everyone in the New York team and the global business. So although we are a smaller presence here, we certainly feel like we are a significant part of the global business, and don't feel like we're left out or anything like that. That's for sure.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Jennifer. Great question. Evelyn, let's go up to you.
Hi guys. So my question for you is, what kind of things do you take from your travels that you've learned, and how do you bring that into your global careers at Citi?
Yeah. Hey, Jennifer. Yeah. Look, that's a great question. To be honest, I don't. Look, I traveled a lot when I was younger, as I said, and when I was, through university and things, when I had the time to travel. And to be fair, it's not like it's something you think of day in, day out when you're at work, of what you can learn or what you can bring to the table through those challenges. Through those traveling times in your life. But I think this inherently, the ability to chat to our colleagues abroad about things that you've experienced or that about in their in their lives or through their culture, it helps, right? I mean, my brother lives in Singapore, so whenever, and I've been to Singapore many times, so whenever a lot of our traders for Citi in Asia sit in Singapore, so whenever I'm chatting to our trading desk up there, I often chat to them about what they're doing or what goes on. And again, this goes back to what I was saying before about building rapport, relationships, and that sort of thing. So look, I don't think it's the be all end all to have traveled and experienced and then be able to relay that, but it definitely helps. You think about, I've been to London a few times, and a lot of our traders sit in London as well. So it's about just building that relationship, right? There's nothing that you think of day in, day out about how you can apply your travels, but it just inherently it helps being able to build that rapport.
All right, thanks Reese, thanks Evelyn. Does anybody here have a burning question number 2 that they really want to ask? I want to give you the chance to do it. We have 4 more minutes. Anybody have a second question they want to ask? If not, I have a question, but I don't want to take your time. All right, well, no burning questions. I'm curious, so we've gotten through some of the harder aspects of finding your way at the beginning of your career and employing some of your newfound global skill set to find a job that's really interesting and interconnected. So let's end on something really fun. I don't know who on this call of our Reach the World travelers has been to Sydney, or if you haven't, I certainly haven't, but would love to. If we came to Sydney, what is the one thing we would absolutely have to do? What is the can't miss it, local tip? What do we need to do when we come to see you?
Tim, I might take that one.
Yeah, okay, go, Reece.
Ben, if I could.
I'll give you both a chance.
Okay, great. I'll because I know Ben will probably say the same thing as me, but you got to go to the beach, right? You got to go to Bondi. You got to get in the water. The Australian culture is very it's outdoors, outdoors orientated. It's having a barbecue with mates, having a few beers down the beach, that sort of thing. So I would say the number one thing you have to do is see the beautiful beaches and obviously the harbour as well of Sydney. It's quite a unique city, being that you've got the Sydney CBD, which is on a harbour, which has a beautiful bridge, all the rest of it, beautiful opera house. It's very stunning. But then, literally within 5 kilometres of the CBD, you've got one of the world's best beaches in Bondi Beach, and that entire coastline is incredible. So, my first tip would be get your togs on, get down the beach. All
right, thanks, Reece. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I think Reece jumped in there quickly because he knew what the answer for me would be. It's going to be similar. Like the whole of the city kind of revolves around the coast and the water and that sort of thing. So, whether it's actually being down at the beach or doing a walk along the coast, or having a drink or a meal out near one of the other, or catching a ferry across the harbour or something like that. There's all these amazing things that can be done, and it kind of really all revolves around the coastline and the natural environment that Sydney is so blessed to have. So, if there's not necessarily one thing specifically that you would have to do, but basically if you just get down to Bondi Beach, there's probably about 1,000 things that you can do that will make you really enjoy it and want to come back again. So, if anyone does come down, let Reece and I know. So we'll be more than happy to show you around.
All right, sounds great. That's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you both so much for sharing your global career journeys with Reach the World today. It was fascinating. I learned a lot. I want to thank you also to our entire on-camera and live stream audiences for the wonderful questions. Reach the World Citi Global Career Journey continues tomorrow with our final stop. We're going to Kampala, Uganda. How does living and working in Kampala compare to what we just heard from Ben and Reece? Join us to find out. Yeah, special thanks to the Citi E4 Education campaign and to all of our many Citi volunteers for making this experience possible. Check out the full lineup of upcoming events at athome.reachtheworld.org. And as I mentioned, we're off to Kampala next, so I hope to see you all there. Thanks.
Cheers, Tim. Thanks, guys. All the best.